Matthew and Serena's relationship spanned 2 decades. Years marked by love, stability, but also by unspoken disappointments. When they met, it had been in the summer of their youth, both vibrant with possibility. Serena, full of ambition, had a sense of adventure that drew Matthew in. He was quieter, preferring stability over spontaneity. But that balance once made them perfect for each other. Together, they built a life, 2 beautiful children, Ava and Leo, and a home in a suburban neighborhood. As the years went by, Matthew's love for Serena deepened, but her spirit began to dim. The vibrant woman who once sought out new experiences now moved through each day as if in a trance. She felt trapped by the routine, waking up, preparing breakfast, seeing the kids off to school, then heading to a job that once excited her but now felt like a burden. What had once been fulfilling became tedious. Her role as a wife and mother consumed her, leaving no room for the woman she once was. Matthew, on the other hand, found comfort in their routine. He liked the rhythm of family life, the warmth of their home, the joy of watching their children grow. He never imagined that Serena felt differently. He believed that their shared sacrifices were worth it, that they would look back on these years with pride. But he was blind to Serena's growing restlessness. The breaking point. On the night of their 20th anniversary, Matthew came home late. He had stopped by various stores, wanting everything to be perfect. Roses, a bottle of her favorite wine, and a carefully chosen dinner. But when he walked through the door, the tension hit him immediately. Serena sat at the dining table, the flickering candlelight casting shadows over her face, highlighting her frustration. "Do you even understand what today means, Matthew?" Her voice cut through the quiet like a blade. 20 years, and you're still the same. Still thinking you can show up with flowers, and everything will be okay. I thought this would make you happy," he stammered, caught off guard by the anger in her voice. Serena's eyes filled with tears as she shook her head. "I don't want flowers, Matthew. I want my life back. I want to feel alive again. I can't keep living like this, trapped in this cycle." Matthew felt his heart lurch. He had never seen this side of Serena, so determined, so unyielding. "What are you saying, Serena?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she steadied herself. "I want time apart. 6 months, no contact. I need to figure out who I am without you, without this house, without all of it. I need to find myself again." The words echoed in Matthew's mind like a death sentence. But he couldn't argue. He saw the desperation in her eyes. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you," he said, though his voice shook with pain. Serena left the next morning, a suitcase in hand. Watching her walk out of the door, Matthew felt as if his world was crumbling. The days that followed were a blur of silence and uncertainty. He tried to focus on Ava and Leo, shielding them from the changes that were tearing their family apart. But each night, after tucking them into bed, he sat alone, haunted by Serena's words. During the separation, Matthew threw himself into his role as a father. He made their morning routines more lively, taking the kids on surprise trips to the park or letting them stay up late for movie nights. He wanted to fill the void Serena had left with memories they could hold on to. But no matter how hard he tried, the house felt empty. Serena's absence was a wound that refused to heal. Meanwhile, Serena embraced her newfound freedom with fervor. She moved into a small apartment in the city, signing up for art classes, rekindling friendships she had let go over the years, and exploring a side of herself that had long been dormant. She went out at night, danced until her feet hurt, and met new people, men who made her feel desired again. There were flings, a few passionate affairs, but nothing that filled the emptiness inside her. She told herself this was what she needed, yet a shadow of doubt lingered. One night, while scrolling through social media, Matthew came across a photo of Serena, her arms around a man he had never seen before. The caption read, "Here's to new beginnings." It felt like a knife twisting in his chest. It wasn't just the image of her with someone else. It was the realization that she was moving on while he was still clinging to the hope that they could mend what was broken. Matthew's heartbreak turned to anger. He began to see Serena's request for space not as a need for self-discovery, but as a way to explore a new life without him. The thought ate away at him, He realized he could no longer wait for her to decide if she wanted to come back. He needed to protect himself and his children from further heartache. He contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process, something he had never thought he'd have to do. It was a difficult decision, but he knew it was necessary. He couldn't keep waiting, hoping Serena would come back to a life she no longer wanted. During the meeting, the lawyer asked him if he was sure. Matthew's hands shook as he signed the papers, but he nodded. I have to do this for me and for my kids. Determined to leave behind the pain, Matthew began planning his exit. He withdrew their savings from the joint account and packed up the essentials for himself and the children. It was a cold, methodical process. Part of him felt guilty for taking such drastic measures, but the bitterness in his heart pushed him forward. Matthew and the kids drove to a small town far from their old life. He found a modest house surrounded by trees, where the air was crisp and the neighbors distant. It wasn't fancy, but it was a place where they could start over. He dedicated himself to making this new life work. He spent weekends building a treehouse with Leo, teaching Ava how to bake, and slowly carving out a sense of normalcy for them. It wasn't easy, but there was a peace in knowing he had taken control of his fate. 6 months passed, and Serena returned to the house, expecting Matthew and the kids to be there. But when she walked in, the emptiness hit her like a wave. The home she had left was now a shell. No laughter, no warmth. She frantically searched each room, calling out their names, but only silence answered her. She tried to reach Matthew, but his phone was disconnected. She searched for him online, but he had left no trace. Serena's panic grew into desperation. She hired a private investigator, hoping to find some clue, but every effort led to a dead end. It was as if Matthew and the children had vanished from the face of the earth. Alone in the empty house, Serena finally confronted the reality she had tried to ignore. She had thought she was seeking freedom, but now she realized she had lost everything that mattered. She sat in their empty bedroom, surrounded by memories of their life together, and cried for hours, tears of regret, loneliness, and a longing for the life she had taken for granted. Serena tried to move on, to recapture the excitement she had once felt. But each night, the emptiness returned. The men she met no longer filled the void. The city's lights only reminded her of the warmth she had lost. She spiraled into depression, her days blending into nights of restless sleep and endless longing. In the countryside, Matthew found himself growing into his new role. He missed Serena, but with each passing day, he felt stronger. He made new friends, joined the local community center, and even met a woman, Elise, who worked at a nearby coffee shop. Elise was different from Serena. She was quiet, gentle, content with life's small pleasures. Slowly, she became a part of his and the children's lives. But Matthew wasn't ready for a new relationship. His time with Elise was careful, filled with long talks and shared silences. She understood that he was still healing, and for the first time, Matthew allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't haunted by the past. Ava and Leo adapted too, finding joy in their new school and the freedom to explore the woods around their home. They asked about their mother sometimes, but Matthew would only say, "She's finding her way too." He never spoke ill of Serena, but he made sure they knew they were safe, that he wouldn't leave them the way he felt Serena had left him. Back in the city, Serena's guilt and regret only deepened. She thought about reaching out to Matthew's parents, but shame held her back. She couldn't face the judgment in their eyes, knowing she was the one who had walked away. Instead, she would drive by their old home, hoping to catch a glimpse of Matthew or the children, but the house remained vacant, just like the life she had left behind. She became consumed with finding them, poring over maps and old contacts, hoping that someone, somewhere, might have a clue. But it was all in vain. Matthew had cut ties completely, building a barrier between his new life and the past that they had once shared. One chilly autumn day, Serena mustered the courage to visit Matthew's parents, who still lived in the same neighborhood. When she arrived, she found the front yard decorated for the fall, a cheerful contrast to her gloomy state of mind. Matthew's mother answered the door, her expression turning cold when she saw Serena. "I'm here to see if you know where they are," Serena said, her voice breaking. "Please, I just need to know if they're okay." Matthew's mother eyed her with a mix of pity and anger. "Matthew asked us not to tell you anything. He made his choice, Serena. You made yours." She closed the door, leaving Serena standing on the porch, feeling more lost than ever. As months turned into years, Matthew continued to build a life that felt right. With Elise, there was no urgency or pressure. She became a source of quiet strength. And while he wasn't ready to fully open his heart again, she understood that and was content to be part of his healing process. Their relationship grew slowly, grounded in trust and respect. Ava and Leo thrived in their new surroundings, becoming close with their father's new friends and taking to their small-town life. They still missed their mother, but came to accept the new normal. Matthew's revenge had been in building a life where he and his children could be happy without Serena's shadow looming over them. Serena's life, however, remained a cycle of regret. She finally came to understand that the freedom she had sought was an illusion. In losing her family, she had lost herself. She filled her time with distractions, but none of it filled the void Matthew and her children had left behind. One late evening, Serena wrote a letter to Matthew, pouring out her heart. She apologized for everything: her abandonment, her selfishness, her failure to appreciate what they had. She asked for a chance to see their children again, to be part of their lives, even if only from a distance. She sent the letter to the only address she had ever known from Matthew's parents, hoping they would forward it. Matthew received the letter a few weeks later, carefully reading Serena's words. He felt a twinge of the old pain, but also a sense of closure. He knew that he could never go back to what once was, but he decided to respond, if only to let her know that Ava and Leo were well. He sent a brief note through his parents, telling Serena that while their past couldn't be undone, she could visit the children on his terms with time. Serena received Matthew's note with mixed emotions. It wasn't the reconciliation she had hoped for, but it was a chance to be there for her children in whatever capacity Matthew would allow. She clung to that hope, determined to make amends, even if it took the rest of her life. Matthew's decision to let Serena back into the children's lives, albeit from a distance, brought a sense of peace. He could see that his children were curious about their mother, and he didn't want his bitterness to deny them the chance to rebuild that bond. They agreed to meet in a neutral space where Serena would see them for the first time in years. The meeting was emotional but subdued. Serena hugged Ava and Leo tightly, tears streaming down her face as she apologized again and again. Matthew stood back, watching with a guarded expression, knowing that this was as much for their children as it was for her. They spoke about their lives, their new home, and Serena listened, trying to absorb everything she had missed. From that day forward, they built a fragile truce, where Serena could be present at a distance, but the divide between her and Matthew remained. She visited occasionally, and while the children's relationship with her was strained, it slowly began to mend. It wasn't the life she had imagined, but it was a small step towards redemption. Years later, Matthew found a quiet moment with Elise on the porch of their home, overlooking the garden where the kids played. He held her hand, grateful for the support she had given him and the new life they had built together. There was a sense of hope that had once seemed impossible. Serena continued living in the city, but she made regular visits to see Ava and Leo. She rebuilt a life, different from the one she had abandoned, but shaped by the lessons she had learned. While the guilt never fully left her, she learned to live with it, finding solace in the time she could spend with her children. Matthew and Serena would never find their way back to each other, but in their separate lives, they found a semblance of peace. And though their paths remained divided, they both carried the scars of their choices, a reminder of the love that once was, and the lives they had forged from its ashes.